Evil defeated, tyranny crushed, and the galaxy finally free to breathe again. But then we meet the New Republic, and suddenly it feels less like a golden age, and more like a cheap sequel nobody asked for. It is like winning the championship and immediately trading your best players because, hey, what could possibly go wrong? From the very beginning, you can feel something is off. Instead of strong leadership, they rotate capitals like a bad office raffle, moving the galactic government from one planet to another, as if stability is overrated. Imagine if every 4 years your entire government just packed up and said, let us try Nebraska this time. That is not a system. That is chaos disguised as fairness. And then they gut the military. The same people who fought tooth and nail against the Empire decide the best way to keep peace is to dismantle their own defences. That is like cancelling your car insurance the day after buying a Ferrari. The galaxy is still crawling with Imperial remnants, and the New Republic acts like they will just fade away if ignored long enough. Spoiler alert, they do not. The politicians are somehow worse. The very arrogance and short-sightedness that destroyed the Old Republic come roaring back like it was waiting in the wings. Senators bicker, dismiss warnings, and pretend everything is fine while the First Order builds superweapons in the backyard. It is the kind of incompetence that makes you want to yell at the screen because you know exactly where it is headed. And when it finally collapses, it is not with a dramatic last stand. It is one laser blast from Starkiller Base, wiping out Hosnian Prime before they even realised they were in a war. Billions gone in an instant, and the so-called guardians of democracy erased like they barely mattered. The New Republic was not defeated, it evaporated, because it was never built to stand in the first place. In this video, we are going to break down why the New Republic was a total waste of time, how it sabotaged itself from day one, why its collapse makes the sequels feel like a rerun of the prequels, and how Star Wars used it to prove that history always repeats when arrogance and complacency take the wheel. Buckle up, because this is not the golden age you thought it was. It is the cautionary tale nobody wanted to admit. The fall of the Empire should have been the start of something new, a chance for the galaxy to rebuild, to learn from its mistakes, and to avoid the same traps that doomed the Old Republic. Yet the more you look at the New Republic, the more curious you get, because instead of fixing anything, they seem determined to repeat history on a faster timeline. At first glance, it sounds promising. The rebels finally win, Palpatine is gone, and democracy is restored. Coruscant is out, Chandrila, and later Hosnian Prime take the capital role, and people cheer at the idea of freedom. But when you peel back the layers, you start to wonder, was this really progress, or just a paint job slapped on the same broken machine? Their structure alone raises questions. The New Republic embraced a rotating capital system, which sounds democratic, but created instability. Each planet taking a turn, as the centre of power meant no consistent leadership, no stable anchor, and endless jockeying for influence. It was supposed to be fair, but it left the government fragile and scattered. And then there is the military. The same people who fought the Empire decided to gut their own defences in the name of peace. They dismantled most of the fleet, limited their armed forces, and trusted everyone to simply get along. That might look noble, but in a galaxy where Imperials were still hiding in the shadows, it was reckless curiosity masquerading as optimism. The New Republic's beginnings raise all the right questions, and the closer you look, the more obvious it becomes that their collapse was written into their foundation from the very start. This is where the frustration kicks in, because watching the New Republic stumble is like yelling at a horror movie character who walks into the dark basement. You know exactly what is coming, and they still do it anyway. The politicians were supposed to be better than the corrupt Senate of the Old Republic. Instead, the same arrogance and short-sightedness crept right back in. Senators turned a blind eye to First Order activity in the unknown regions, dismissed warnings from the resistance, and bickered over trivial matters while danger grew. It is infuriating to watch the same mistakes repeat, like nobody learned a thing. The gutting of the military might be the most frustrating decision of all. Mon Mothma's leadership leaned so far toward peace that she dismantled most of the fleet. Which sounds noble until you realise the Empire's remnants were regrouping. By the time the First Order unveiled Starkiller Base, the New Republic had nothing in place to stop it. That is not peacekeeping. That is leaving the keys in the ignition for the next tyrant. Because the New Republic was not just another failed government, it was the dream of countless rebels who fought and died, believing they were building something better. Their sacrifices should have meant a lasting golden age, but instead they were wasted on a system that crumbled almost immediately. Think about Leia Organa. She gave everything to the cause, but when she tried to warn the Senate about the First Order, they brushed her off as paranoid. The sorrow of her story is devastating, because the same people who cheered her victory abandoned her voice when it mattered most. Her reward for saving the galaxy was being sidelined. The citizens of the galaxy faced sorrow too. Entire systems that expected protection found themselves ignored when they needed help. The New Republic was too busy dismantling itself to respond to crises. It left worlds vulnerable to exploitation, piracy, and eventually outright occupation by the First Order. For everyday people, victory over the Empire meant little change in their lives. The destruction of Hosnian Prime is another moment of deep sorrow. In an instant, the heart of the New Republic and billions of lives are obliterated. What was meant to be the galaxy's new centre of power becomes another cautionary tale of fragility. And the tragedy is that almost nobody remembers their names. Alderaan is remembered, Hosnian Prime is forgotten. The sorrow of the New Republic is that it was born of hope, built on sacrifice, and yet doomed itself to failure, leaving its people to pay the price once again. And yet, even in failure, there is awe in the scale of the story, because the New Republic's rise and fall show just how ambitious Star Wars can be when it explores the cycle of power. It is awe-inspiring not because they succeeded, but because their collapse feels so inevitable and so cinematic. The visual spectacle alone is awe-worthy. The gleaming chambers of the new Senate, the shining fleets reduced to skeleton crews, the grand ceremonies of victory. All of it captures the illusion of strength, even as the cracks grow underneath. The galaxy looked to them as a symbol of hope, and for a brief time, the spectacle convinced everyone. The awe also comes from how the First Order exploited their weakness. Watching Starkiller Base fire and erase Hosnian Prime is horrifying, but it is also awe-inspiring in its scale. It shows just how fragile peace can be when built on arrogance. The New Republic's destruction is terrifyingly poetic in its suddenness. Even the storytelling choice to mirror the Old Republic adds awe. Star Wars deliberately shows us the cycle repeating. Corruption, complacency, collapse. The awe comes from realizing this was not an accident. It was baked into the DNA of the galaxy. That cycle of rise and fall is what makes the universe feel mythic. So yes, the New Republic was a disaster, but the awe comes from how perfectly it demonstrates Star Wars' larger themes. That power is fragile, history repeats, and arrogance always leads to downfall. And their resilience proves that even when governments crumble, people can still choose to resist. Leia embodies that hope. Cast aside by politicians, she forms the Resistance, a smaller but far more determined group that refuses to bow to the First Order. She proves that institutions can fail, but leadership grounded in conviction can still inspire. Leia is the living reminder that hope does not die with governments. The Resistance itself gives hope. Pilots, smugglers, deserters and outcasts join together to fight a war they know they are outnumbered in. They lack the resources of the New Republic, but they make up for it with courage. Their survival is proof that hope does not come from fleets or capitals, but from people willing to risk everything. Even Rey and Finn represent hope. Rey's discovery of her power and Finn's defection from the First Order show that individuals matter more than institutions. They embody the idea that the fight against tyranny always begins with personal choice, not political systems. Hope survives because Star Wars insists that even when governments collapse, ordinary people can still change the galaxy. And that message outlasts the failures of the New Republic. But the resolution of the New Republic story is tragic. Because for all the sacrifice that birthed it, the government was doomed from the start. It was too weak, too divided, too blind to see danger looming. And when the First Order rose, it was swept away without even a real fight. The tragedy is not just the destruction of Hosnian Prime. It is that the New Republic wasted the victory of the rebellion. Instead of building something lasting, they built a fragile echo of the Old Republic, one destined to collapse under its own arrogance. Their failure proves they never learned, And yet, there is a bitter resolution in this cycle, because Star Wars uses the New Republic to remind us that institutions are only as strong as the people who uphold them. Without vigilance, courage, and accountability, even the most celebrated victory can rot into complacency. The New Republic story resolves not with triumph, but with a warning. A golden age is not guaranteed just because evil is defeated. The fight for justice never ends, and arrogance is always waiting to undo progress. So yes, the New Republic was a total waste of time, and Star Wars proved it by showing us that history repeated itself, leaving the galaxy vulnerable yet again. A tragic ending for a government that was never built to last.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.